This is another video that a lot of you wanted to see, but with my own spin on it. If you've been subscribed since the beginning, you know I love finding ways that things are connected. I've seen a bunch of comments asking me to talk about Luke and Jess's relationship, and while drafting up the idea for that video, it got me thinking. So get comfortable, get relaxed, and let's talk about what Jess and Lane have in common.
Sierra loves TV. Yes, I made a theme song so that I can talk about all my favorite shows. Oh yeah.
And this is just your disclaimer that this is not me talking about any of the actors themselves, but more so their characters. Please do not attack me in the comments. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion, even those who disagree with me. But let's keep it friendly. Alright, let's get started with the show. So a lot of you want to know my opinion on the Luke and Jess dynamic. I think Luke was the perfect person to be in Jess's ear when he was younger. Jess was a troubled youth and he was headstrong. I have a video where I talk about Jess and Rory and their downfall. A large part of that was Jess was lost, and I think he would have benefited early from Luke's presence in his life if he'd been able to be there for him sooner. Jess had a lot of things working against him based off where he was coming from, and unfortunately by the time Luke was able to be a stable role model in his life, his words were almost lost upon Jess, but not completely. With Luke and Jess's life, Jess got to experience having a consistent father figure. Jess mentions how his mother dated a bunch of guys, and Luke claims they were all losers, so that's not really giving Jess a view of what a positive male role model looks like. Through Luke's bond with Jess and him showing Jess kindness, Luke softens with time as well. Luke makes it clear that he wants Jess to do something good with his life. Luke presents real consequences for Jess not living up to his potential. And I think Luke hits a point with Jess after he finds out that Jess isn't graduating, where he realizes that hammering him further about his mistake isn't going to work, and he sees that he needs to just focus on getting him to graduation. Luke knows that Jess is smart. He's probably the only one besides Rory to even acknowledge just how smart Jess is. It's also clear when Jess leaves town for the first time that Luke and Rory are the only ones who miss Jess, because they are the only ones able to get through to him. But what also ends up happening is that they even get to a point with Jess where they can't reach him. And I believe that Lorelai went into talking to Jess with the best intentions, but Lorelai is coming from such a maternal place and she can't connect with him. It's like even if she comes to a point where she can understand him, or when it comes to the fact that she shares similar history to Jess when it comes to being misunderstood, she can't let go of the thoughts of how bad he is for Rory at that time. I don't know if there's anyone as important to Lorelai as Rory other than Luke. So she knows he's bad for her daughter and is not the kind of company she wants her daughter to keep, but she tolerates him for Luke. Jess wasn't just influenced by Luke, he had an impact on Luke as well. Jess gave Luke a purpose. Jess causes Luke to face his feelings about Lorelai, because Jess seems to be the only one who will bring it up to him that he likes her and he's not doing anything about it. The way I see a connection is through like two characters that are being mentored by someone older than them. In a similar way, Lorelai took Lane in as her own. Lorelai acts almost like a third parent to Lane. Lorelai lets Lane sleep over when she's not feeling the best, she gives her sound advice, and she helps her with her passions like with the band. Both Luke and Lorelai had equal opportunities to play a pivotal role in Jess and Lane's lives. Lane fell victim to a poor ending, which I don't believe was a total reflection of the reality in the situation, but unfortunately it was one of the possible outcomes, similar to how Jess could have never ended up turning his life around in the end. When we're talking about possible endings, another reality is that Jess also could have decided to come back and work at Luke's or take over Luke's. He also could have never left Rory, and Rory would have stayed in an unstable relationship. Both Lane and Jess needed role models that weren't their own parents to give them a broader view on life. Lorelai is someone who understands Lane and knows how to communicate with her in a way that makes her feel heard. Lorelai comes from this place of knowing what it's like to feel ignored or undervalued where she lives, just like Lane does at home. Lane has this relationship with her mother where for a long time Mrs. Kim doesn't even invest into what Lane actually wants for her life, but instead insists that she knows better, which I'm sure reminds Lorelai of the way that Emily raised her. Emily always thought that anything Lorelai wanted for herself wasn't as important as the plan Emily had already laid out for her. While Mrs. Kim isn't as detrimental to Lane's self-esteem, Lane being the only one in her family who has her interests makes her feel isolated. I'm sure some would argue that Lane has Rory to talk to, but Rory doesn't understand what Lane is experiencing quite in the same way that Lorelai does. Lorelai seems like she's big on giving Lane an outlet for her issues with her mother, almost like she would have wanted. So what do you guys think about Jess and Lane and how they're similar? Should Jess and Lane have dated? Also, something else I thought about is maybe because of the way Rory has a lot of people in her life that were misunderstood at home, it allowed Rory to be able to connect with Jess. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you guys in the next one.